Hi, we're going to go over Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is designing a questionnaire. The designing of a questionnaire is imperative whenever you're doing primary research. You can't just sit down and arbitrarily put some information together, as we've been discussing in previous chapters. It's really important to think all the way through what it is that your objectives are, what it is that you're trying to measure, as well as how you're going to go about getting that measure, the method that you're going to use to collect the information. The learning objectives we're going to go over today are describing the steps in the questionnaire design, what the questionnaire development process is, summarizing the characteristics of what would be considered a good questionnaire, how we use cover letters in the process of using a questionnaire or distributing a questionnaire, and then the other associated documents that may go along with the questionnaire development, but also implementation and execution of providing the surveys and distributing the surveys and collecting the data. So first, the steps in a questionnaire. There's 8 steps. The first step is confirming the research objective. So again, what is it that we're trying to accomplish by using primary data? This goes all the way back to some of the first chapters that we started talking about. What is it that we're trying to get at? We've decided that secondary data isn't enough, or we don't have appropriate secondary data, so now we're going to do primary data, and we're now determining the kinds of survey instrument that we're going to use. The second step is selecting the appropriate data collection method. So are we using a telephone survey? Are we using a survey? Are we using a web-based survey? We have to, number 3, develop what the questions are, and along with those questions, the scaling. So the questions again become the items that make up our variables, and those variables then make up the constructs. The fourth one is determining the layout and evaluation of the questionnaire. So it's really imperative when we're putting together a questionnaire that that we have it, the sections are explained clearly, that the parts that we want together, the questions that we want together, have some logic for keeping them together. We want to make sure that the scaling that we're using is clear and understandable for the person who's responding. The fifth step would be obtaining initial client approval. So we would put together a draft. Lots of times when you're using some sort of an online tool, you are able to get basically a Word document of that tool printed out, so that you'll be able to take a look at exactly what the questions are going to look like, what the responses, what your options are, different radio buttons or drop-down menus, and what all of those choices are. You pre-test it, so you're always going to test your survey on a small sample. What would be some of the reasons why you would want to do this? Well, you're going to be interested in whether or not anybody has any questions. Do they, have a problem in a particular section? What was the problem in that section? Are they understanding the way that the questions are formatted and posed to them? Are they able to then provide the information back, and is it the kind of responses that you would expect to be seeing? If not, you want to do some follow-up conversation with the folks who have taken the test to really see what the stumbling blocks were. Upon that feedback, you'll revise your survey, and then of course you'll maybe test it again, and then you'll finalize it with the client's approval, and then you'll implement the survey. So those are the steps. Questionnaire development process. So again, we're going to figure out what our objectives are, and we're going to figure out how we're going to go about getting our sample. How many people do we need to have? What kind of participants do we need to include in order to get to the kind of information, get to the kind of people that are going to provide us with information that's going to be useful for whatever it is that we're doing. If we're designing a product, or if we're designing some sort of an ad campaign, we want to make sure that we are surveying people who are going to provide us with the kind of information about our target market that we're going to be able to then use and either for that product or for that marketing campaign. So the questionnaire is a set of questions or scales that's specifically designed then to collect data and then give us the information in order to make these kinds of decisions and solve business problems. Good questionnaires enable researchers to get kind of a really good understanding of some of the different constructs that consumers have, such as attitudes or what their preferences are, beliefs and values, feelings, behavioral intention. So not just the behavior itself, which the action is also a part of it, but the behavioral intention might be, do they plan to do something? So we talked a little bit about that in the last chapter. When you use the careful wording, a lot of these scales, either in the development of them or if you're using existing scales, they've been carefully worded and they have clear instructions so that you're going to be able to get at that information. The characteristics of a good questionnaire. So first of all, the researcher is going to have to choose the type of scale format. This goes back to what we talked about in previous chapters. Are we looking at nominal or ordinal, interval, or ratio kinds of data? What are the question formats? So are they going to be open-ended? So again, when we were talking about the qualitative kinds of data, are going to be open-ended or are they going to be closed-ended? Or are we going to use these scales and appropriate scales? We have to talk about the way that we're going to collect this data. Is it going to be personal interviews? Are we going to use the phone, the CATI, the CATI, in order to collect the information? Is it going to be self-administered? Is it going to be something that's mailed to the person, or is it going to be something that they're going to complete on a computer and have it web-based? Good questionnaires then they're relatively simple. There's kind of a burnout factor associated with taking a survey, as you probably recognize yourselves. I'm sure you've taken surveys. And so it's really important to take that into consideration. On the other hand, when you get someone who's willing to sit down and take the survey, you also want to take advantage, if you will, of the time that that person is willing to give you and get as much information from them as possible. So there's always this trade-off whenever you're using a questionnaire. So the questions then are simple, straightforward, they're clear, they're logical, and that's some of the reason why you're using some of these pre-testing and the willing to revise them to make sure that people do understand them the way that you intend for them to. It's going to be meaningful. So you don't want to have a person answering a question and in the middle of the question looking at it and thinking, I have no idea what they're talking about. And then the way that you get the information is you start out very broad or general, and then you become more specific. So there's also usually, if you've received these either emails with a link to a website or you've received a survey in the mail, it comes with a cover letter, and that cover letter will give you some idea about the credibility perhaps of the survey, the person or the group doing the survey, or it's going to let you know why it's important for you to be cooperative and why your thoughts or your input is important into this research. Rarely, if ever, would a good cover letter tell you exactly what it is that you're trying to do. And again, that comes back to, they don't want to bias. The cover letter doesn't want to bias the respondents' answers. And then I talked about other documents that are associated with a questionnaire. So rarely is a questionnaire distributed just by one person. So it's usually a group effort. Depending on what they're doing, you will have some sort of a plan of action. You'll have associated documentation that goes along with who you're going to be surveying, how you're going to go about getting them. There's usually a budget involved. The people that have the skill sets to be putting the questionnaires together will put them together. Maybe a different group of people that will need the whole piece of, all of the pieces of information in order to do the analysis, so that all of those documents then inside of an organization or in conjunction with a client will come together to really kind of make up the whole package that goes with the survey, so that you'll be able to see from start to finish as the client or as the organization doing the survey what all the different pieces and parts are. And with that, that's a conclusion of Chapter 8. Thank you.